Hi everyone, my name is Elizabeth Garofalo. I chose to talk about the death penalty with you. The reason being is I am a criminal justice major, and over the past 5 or 6 years of my studies, I feel as though I've learned a lot about it, and it's actually altered my view on how I feel about different aspects of the death penalty. The death penalty has been around for years. It's been around in different forms, such as crucifixion, hanging, burning, drowning, and we know the typical lethal injection with a needle and a drug, but there's many different forms. Turning to such a cruel act is obviously not the most favorable way to instill punishment. But it's still, as I said today, it's used throughout the world. Eventually, this brought a much needed reform. Severe punishment for petty crimes such as cutting down a tree slowly began to fade away and has decreased the number of individuals executed through the death penalty. In the 19th century, many states began to build penitentiaries, which reduced the number of crimes that were punishable. Eventually, Pennsylvania became the first state to abolish the death penalty, and other states slowly followed. Since then, capital punishment has slowly began diminishing in the United States, and in 2012, Connecticut, which is where I'm from, was the 17th state to abolish the death penalty. Capital punishment can be a very controversial subject. Some may say it violates human rights, while others feel as though these individuals deserve to be put to death for their crimes. One contributing reason to the decline in capital punishment was that there is a lack of the drug needed to perform the procedure. The reason for this is that Europeans were opposed to the death penalty, and most of the time the drug is purchased in Europe. So back in October in Missouri, there was an execution postponed due to the fact that the United States was nervous about getting the drug from Europe, because they were nervous about not being able to obtain the drug for other reasons in the future. So it's becoming a reoccurring factor across the world. States are beginning to find different flaws in the death penalty. More and more are considering abolishing it. This is resulting in the decrease of the death penalty. Many individuals can argue that capital punishment has too much room for error, and a potential to even cause more pain to the individual who is going through the procedure and to their families. When lethal injection goes wrong, which I can't even say rarely because I've never heard of it going wrong. There have been cases where it's a terrible outcome. It's a horrific scene where the individual jerks around and you can visibly tell they're in a lot of pain for a long time, and it actually draws out how long they're there and suffering before they actually die. So that's another reason why many people are opposed to it. Some people say it's ineffective, and it fails to meet the needs of the families of the person who is murdered. I'm sorry. Another flaw to capital punishment is that it costs much more to execute someone than to sentence them to life in prison without parole. that was a big shocker to me, and anybody I bring that up to, it's usually a big shock. They don't believe me, and they sit there on their phone and they Google it to see if it's true, and it is. It's actually costs more money to try to sentence someone to the death penalty, because there's so many court dates that you have to go through, and lawyers and people who work in the court. So it actually costs more money to sentence someone to death. Also, who is it to say that the inmate who's on death row isn't looking up different cases and different excuses for what he did while he's sitting there on death row? You know, many people even write books about what they're going through and make money while they're sitting there. So it's, you know, there's that negative to it too. Whether or not your personal opinion classifies you as someone that's for or against the death penalty, there is something interesting to be said about the government and our judicial system acting as God and and deciding on a person's fate. Is the convicted going to learn something by the death penalty? When an individual is committing a crime, the last thing that they're thinking about is the repercussions. What's going to happen to me? And, what could happen to me? They're not thinking about that. It's not going to deter someone if they're not thinking about it. With more programs put into play for individuals during their upbringing, I feel like we can try and avoid the younger generation to follow other people's footsteps. Children growing up in a less fortunate area, putting together some type of program to keep them busy, to show them what they are really capable of, could possibly help them, could possibly deter a child from taking that path. While most of the time the offender has the ability to control their own actions, there are those few times that they don't. Where does mental health come into play? How do we work to rehabilitate people who have a mental illness and commit these acts? Or do we? These are all questions to think about. Whether or not the death penalty is a justified way of punishment. There's many people out there who need the help, and really you can't call someone and get help for them. Well, here in Connecticut, I'm not sure how it is in other states, but you can't really call and get help for someone unless they're willing. So where is the mental health? There's some things to think about. I hope I taught you something interesting, and I hope to talk to you all again soon. Bye-bye.